I am not a wealthy woman. I took some risks and I am okay. I decided to retire early because I think, women in their 30s and 40s have a very loud clicking biological clock if they have one. And then I think there are some of us that as we get later in life, we start having what I call a death clock. And mine is ticking fairly loudly, even though people in my family live forever. There's things that I want to do and a lifestyle that I want to lead that is really more ideal for earlier in 60s and 70s than in 80s and 90s. I'm not going to be doing the kind of traveling I do now when I'm 87.
Hi, I'm Luisa.
And I'm Michael.
And we're Retired Life Mexico.
And we're really excited to talk to Terri today about her life and travels here in Mexico.
And she's retired too. So that's helpful because that's our channel.
Nice.
And she's going to talk about how she travels solo and how she finds accommodations from Airbnbs to hotels and even hostels. She's going to tell us about her budget and getting Mexican residency. She's also going to talk about her health insurance and if she has travel insurance.
Right.
Also, she's going to give us an overview of what her friends and family think about her traveling in Mexico, which leads to, does she feel safe here? And you got to stay tuned for her story about getting pickpocketed.
Yeah, so let's get started.
But first, you got to remember she's going to end with tips for travelers and retirees living here in Mexico. So stay tuned.
Yes. Hi, I'm Terri Smith. I'm a 62-year-old solo female traveler who's spending a lot of time in Mexico.
And how long have you been doing that?
Officially, as a retired person for the last 2 years, I've just started year number 3. I did a number of months prior to that before I officially retired.
Traveling in Mexico?
Traveling in Mexico, yes.
Why did you pick Mexico?
I was trying to decide if I was going to stay in the relationship that I was in, and that relationship was centered around sailing. We were planning to sail parts of the world, if not all of the world. And when that was dissolving, a friend said, well, do you want to buy your own boat? And I said, well, perhaps I should go offshore and see if I get seasick first. I found an opportunity to sail from San Diego to La Paz, Mexico. And in the process, I showed up in Cabo with nowhere to stay, no return airline ticket. I hadn't really thought through the ending part of that. I was so excited about getting on a boat and being able to go offshore. So I got to Cabo. I figured out how to take the bus to La Paz, found a place to stay in La Paz by using one of the expat groups in La Paz, found a great safe place to stay, and then decided I really liked La Paz, and I stayed there for a couple months before I decided that I needed to go back to the US.
You got to La Paz. Can you get more specific about how you found the place to stay?
Sure. So there is a group in La Paz that is basically kind of a yacht club for sailors because La Paz is a big sailing place. And so a lot of people who come down from the US and British Columbia spend their winters in La Paz. And I just posted there and said, hey, I'm getting off of a boat. I'm in Cabo. I'm coming to La Paz. I really need a safe, inexpensive place to stay, and everybody unanimously said, you go here to Casa Buena. It's owned by ex-cruisers, and it's really a great place. And so I called them and got a hold of Milton, who was one of the owners, and Milton was amazing. He was like, I have a room, and oh wait, it's Independence Day in Mexico. Let me see if the buses are running for you. And I was like, where does this happen, that somebody who runs a bed and breakfast will actually check the website to see if the buses are running for you? And so the buses were running. I figured out where the bus stop was the bus station was by looking at Google Maps, showed up, and then realized after I tried to communicate with the gal at the counter and getting help from somebody who was there, which by the way happens in Mexico all the time. If you're struggling to communicate, someone will always offer to help you. And this gal behind me said, would you like some help? And I said, yes, please. And she said, she's telling you that the bus left an hour ago. And I realized I was in the wrong time zone.
Oh.
So I got to sit in the Cabo bus station for an extra hour, which was totally delightful. And then got on the bus and went to La Paz.
We just want to interrupt this interview to say thank you to all of our subscribers. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back.
We really appreciate you.
And we're on our way to 6,000 subscribers.
Yay.
Who knew? So
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. We'll get on with this show. And how do you feel about safety doing that kind of stuff?
I have never had an issue in Mexico. I will also say, though, that I'm not a super late night go out kind of person. So I'm not out at 2 a.m. by myself trying to navigate taxis or buses or anything like that. But I have never had a situation in Mexico where I have felt unsafe. I use the same street smarts that I've used in Boston or LA or any place else. I find that people here are just hardworking. I've never had an issue in a taxi. I've never had an issue at a bus station. It's pretty obvious that I'm not from here. So I do occasionally have people who come up and ask me for money, but I've never had it go beyond that, even when I've told them no.
Okay, so let's talk about how you find places out that first experience, because where else have you found to stay?
I went to Mazatlan for the solar eclipse last year in 2024. I went to Zihuatanejo, Mexico in 2024 for Guitar Fest, which if anyone is really into guitar music, you don't want to miss that. It is amazing. It's a fundraiser for getting music into the local schools in Zihuatanejo, and it's some of the best music I've heard in a long time. And I've spent time in Loreto, I've spent time in Barra de Navidad, I've spent time in San Miguel de Allende, and I've spent time here in Oaxaca, where we are right now. And basically what I do is I check Airbnb, I'll check booking.com, I always look at Google Maps. Even if I find a place that's on Booking or Airbnb, I'll try to find it on Google Maps because sometimes you get a different level of review on Google Maps. There are also places that are local that are in Google Maps that are not on Airbnb or Booking. Also expat Facebook groups. I found a sublet for an apartment from an American family that was going back to the US for 2 months in San Miguel de Allende. And so I sublet their apartment for the 2 months that they were gone. And that was fantastic because it was nicely furnished. It had all the kitchen stuff. It was great. It was in a nice neighborhood in San Antonio, which is a great neighborhood because it has a good mix of both expats and Mexicans. And those are the kind of neighborhoods I really like to be in because I like to practice my Spanish. And I read reviews religiously. You have to read the reviews because otherwise you end up next to a bar or a disco that's going until 3 or 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, or you find out that the neighbors have 18 dogs and it's super noisy because there's multiple families living there, or it's not very clean or whatever, right? You have to, just like in the US.
And what about hotels? Do you ever stay at hotels?
In Zihuatanejo, I stayed in a hotel because condos and Airbnbs were way too expensive for me in Zihuatanejo.
Oh.
So I stayed in a hotel for almost 3 weeks. It was a great little place. It was in Centro. So it was not in any of the real touristy areas. Like right next door was the sewing machine repair shop. And there were tons of food stands and vendors for fruits and vegetables. Yeah, and that was fantastic. They had a little breakfast restaurant that only did breakfast, and so that was included in your stay. I met a bunch of other really great people and just had a really wonderful time. And it was great for getting to the different venues because I was volunteering at Guitar Fest.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And what about these hostels that you stay at?
I think when some people think hostels, they think that you're sleeping with other people you don't know. I don't do that. I'm not a good sleeper with strangers, so I'm just not going to do that. Plus, two, I snore. So out of kindness, I like having access to a kitchen, and I like having places to sit that are not the bed. If you go on vacation for a week or two, you can sit on your bed. But when you live like this all the time, you just can't sit on your bed all the time. Ergonomics, comfort, all of it. I look for places that have kitchens, but I rent private rooms. Sometimes I'll share a bathroom, or sometimes I will have a private bath like I do at the place I'm currently staying in Oaxaca. There's other times too where I'll also rent a room in someone's house. And that I really like because then you get to connect with somebody locally and you get all the local hints and tips.
And how much does something like that cost?
My budget for housing overall is between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. But in Mexico, I find that I can stay under that, provided that I'm not trying to have, a 5-star experience in some fancy hotel. The place that I'm here in Oaxaca right now, I think I'm averaging about $35 a night. And I've got my own bathroom, my own bedroom, and a really well-equipped kitchen here and lovely common areas. Up until May, whenever I came to Mexico, I always came on a tourist visa. In April, I was in a different part of the world and decided that I wanted to get my temporary residency in Mexico. I wanted to have a place outside of the US that I could land if I needed to, and I could qualify financially through financial solvency for temporary residency in Mexico. So I decided to do it while I could. I did it through the consulate in Phoenix. They were fantastic. It did take me a number of weeks to a month or two to get an appointment. They are incredibly busy attending to the needs of many people. So patience was definitely needed if you pursue this, but it's very nice. And then I finished the process when I was in San Miguel de Allende, and I did actually hire a facilitator. There is a Facebook group, Getting Mexican Residency, which was invaluable to me. I highly recommend that people use it. There's a ton of information, consulate-specific information, as well as just the process in general. And I did it so that I could stay for longer than 180 days if I needed to, without having to worry about doing a visa run. A couple reasons. One is if I were in a situation where I needed to save money, this is a great place to come. I have found that for me, being able to do this lifestyle requires body work, so massages, chiropractors, whatever. And Mexico is a great place to do that. There are some really great massage therapists here, and they are a quarter of the price of what I was paying in Seattle and Salt Lake and those places. So, and the quality is just as good. I wanted to have a place that I could come if I needed to rest or heal or just be. I am not a wealthy woman. I took some risks and I am okay. I decided to retire early because I think, you know, women in their 30s and 40s have a very loud clicking biological clock if they have one. And then I think there are some of us that as we get later in life, we start having what I call a death clock. And mine is ticking fairly loudly, even though people in my family live forever. There's things that I want to do and a lifestyle that I want to lead that is really more ideal for earlier in 60s and 70s than in 80s and 90s. I'm not going to be doing the kind of traveling I do now when I'm 87.
Right.
I hope I can, but I probably won't be. But the nice thing is, you know, I can go out and have a perfectly great lunch and, you know, it's $12 or less in US dollars. And it's just fantastic. And it's at a sit-down restaurant with a waiter or a waitress. But yeah, definitely not rich. Don't have unlimited means and incomes. On the health insurance thing, so I do have health care in the United States, but I do buy health care here in Mexico. Even though my policy in the US will cover me in an emergency, I don't want to fight about what an emergency is. If my wrist is broken in 4 places, I don't want to argue that yes, I could travel with that and come back to the US that it's not an emergency. So I buy a policy through GeoBlue that covers me for 182 days out of the US. I have to start it in the US, but it will cover me for a trip length of 182 days. It also covers me for pre-existing conditions because I have a couple of them. I can do a one-time renewal outside of the US for another 182 days. So I only have to return to the US every 364 days. And return is a day. You literally could fly in at 9 a.m., leave at 5 p.m. and start a new policy. They have different policies depending upon what people need. I spend approximately, well, I just had a birthday, so it's probably going to go up. So it's probably going to be $9 a day for my health care. For me, that is worth it. I insure for my health what I can't afford to lose. If I were to have a heart attack or stroke in Mexico, that would be a financial hardship for me. Because remember, I'm not rich. That's what my insurance is for. My insurance is for if something catastrophic happens, I can get care in Mexico without having to worry about giving them $100,000 upfront payment. And especially if I'm unconscious, I can't do that anyway. So it's for getting hit by a bus, getting hit by a taxi, having a heart attack, having a stroke, those sorts of things. And I do that, that's my personal choice because I believe that insurance is for what you can't afford to lose. If I get an ear infection or a bladder infection or whatever, I just pay cash. It's usually 500 pesos, 600 pesos for a doctor visit, and then, you know, another 500 or 600 pesos for medications. And I don't even submit those to GeoBlue. I just pay for those and don't even hassle with them later. You asked me a great question, which was, do my friends and family think I'm crazy for traveling around Mexico alone? I have friends and family that think I am insane because they can't imagine living the way that I live, which is in different places and not having a permanent base. I do not have a permanent base. The most people who love me are in Salt Lake City, Utah, and that's the way I answer the question when people ask me where I live in the United States, because I don't live anywhere in the US right now. With that being said, I also have some friends and family who think that it's very inspiring what I do. And a few of them have actually started traveling to Mexico because they see that it is safe and that I'm having fun. That's a great thing. I like having people expand their horizons because of something I've done. So I think it depends on who the person is. I also have some friends who are getting older and don't have the ability to travel like I travel. And so I think they wish that they could. We touched on earlier a little bit about the safety thing, but I want to revisit that because I am small, I am blonde, and it's pretty obvious that I'm not from Mexico. And I really do not ever feel unsafe. I would say the biggest thing that makes me feel unsafe would be the stray dogs. I'm finding that more and more communities, though, are addressing the stray dog situation. So I haven't had any encounters recently, and I feel more safe in Mexico going to large events and activities like the Day of the Dead celebrations, like celebrating the solar eclipse on the beach in Mazatlan with 20,000 of my new friends. So I feel much safer here, and I never look for exits or where in a crowd do I need to go if something were to happen? I just don't do that in Mexico because it just doesn't happen. Could something random happen? Yes, but something random can happen anywhere. It's about risk mitigation. I don't carry a lot of money with me. I make sure that I have travel pants that have a pocket down on the leg, and that's usually where I keep my wallet. I did get pickpocketed at the parade the other day here in Oaxaca for Day of the Dead. They got into the upper pocket of my backpack that I carry, my day pack, and all that was in there was gum, hand sanitizer, and tissues, and they weren't interested in any of that because the wallet was in my pants pocket down low. So you'd have to be a very short person to get into that pocket. You do things like that to mitigate your risk just like you would anywhere else. But no, I never feel unsafe. I take that risk mitigation seriously. I make sure I have my travel health insurance. I make sure I don't carry a lot of cash with me. I keep some credit cards in my room. I take some credit cards with me. I have 2 ATM cards so that if one gets eaten by a machine, I can still get money out with my second ATM card. Charles Schwab, they're fantastic. And they had no problems with me having 2 separate accounts. I think you just have to think about what are those scenarios that could happen that aren't necessarily dangerous but are impactful and kind of awful. I use an iPhone 12 and get a local SIM and use that for my Google Maps. I keep my good phone on a leash for taking photos. If someone wants to take the phone that I have the local SIM at my iPhone 12, it's an iPhone 12. I can pick up another one pretty cheap somewhere. So I try to mitigate all those risks so that my life isn't overly inconvenienced if something happens. But as far as my personal safety, I feel very safe here. Well, my friend Dawn just published a book that I think is really great for people, and it's called Let's Not Play Small. She's actually a nomad traveler that I've not yet met in person, but I follow her on Facebook, and her book is filled with all sorts of great tips about how to get started and what kinds of things you might run into. I think it would be a great place to start whether you're female or male. I also think people can start small to see how it feels. Try some trips. And I will say that the online communities, the expat groups, the nomad groups, individual people that post about different places, I mean, they're a great resource, but they're also can be great friends. One of the things I love doing is when I go to a new place and there's someone I've been corresponding with or following for a while on Facebook, and I finally get to meet them in person. Like you guys, getting to meet you guys in San Miguel. So I know there are people that are like, oh, I don't do social media. But let me tell you, social media is a great way to not be overly lonely and to stay connected and to make new friends as you travel and to understand the places that you're going. That clicking clock is really loud in my head, and I have a lot of things I want to see and a lot of things I want to do. There's a lot of really cool places here in Mexico that I am definitely not finished visiting and doing and seeing and checking off my list.
So wasn't that an interesting interview with Terri?
It was amazing. I love her life.
And she's having the time of her life traveling through Mexico And we hope it helped you in seeing that maybe you want to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on down.
And thanks to Terri for taking time out of her busy life to sit down with us and share her experience here in Mexico.
Yeah, thank you, Terri.
And the rest of you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below.
Yeah, we really appreciate you.
And we'll see you in the next one.
Ciao.
Hasta la próxima.